So please know that the recording is in progress, and it's my pleasure. I'm Karen X, and on behalf of Lincolnwood Together, to welcome everybody here tonight and everybody who watches this later virtually online. Debra Shore is a commissioner on the board of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. She was first elected in 2006 and was re-elected in 2012 and again in 2018. She has been a strong advocate for cleaning up Chicago waterways and for resource recovery, including the reuse of treated water and generation of biogas. In recognition of her work, she received the Public Officials Award from the Water Environmental Federation in 2013. Debra is a past president of the Board of Directors for Congregation Sukkot Shalom in Wilmette, and a past chair of the Board of Directors for the Great Lakes Protection Fund. She served as president of the Board of Directors of the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership and serves on the board of the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership Training Academy. Debra was the founding editor of Chicago Wilderness Magazine and is an active volunteer restoring prairies and oak woods, and was a founding board member of Friends of the Forest Preserves. Debra graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Goucher College in Baltimore, Maryland, with a degree in philosophy and visual arts. She earned master's degrees from Johns Hopkins University and Columbus College of Chicago. In 2008, she earned a certificate in executive education from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Debra lives with her spouse, Kathleen Gillespie, in Skokie, Illinois, and has climbed 42 of the 54 mountains in Colorado, more than 14,000 feet high. I think we should start with that. That's amazing. So it's my pleasure to mute myself and direct your attention, and let's hear from Debra Shore. Debra Shore, thank you so much for being here.
Karen, thank you for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. Can you all hear me okay? Great. So I can run through a number of slides that are sort of a bit of history and a bit about the district if you want to see some pictures, or I'm just happy to talk and then answer questions. What would your preference be?
My preference is to see your slides and to hear information. Can I see some thumbs up? You guys, you can use the reactions, or there you go, you're seeing thumbs up.
So let me see if I can do this share screen bit. Hang on, and let's see. Are you all seeing slides?
Not yet.
Not yet. Huh.
Do you need some guidance? Do you need any help?
Hang on, let's see. Yeah, I haven't done this that often where I'm just doing it.
No problem. There we go. We got it. Good job.
All right.
That was it, slideshow. There we go.
So obviously this is our blue planet from space. and it is blue because it's a very watery planet, but only 3% of the water on Earth is fresh water. And of that, only 1% is available for human consumption. And of that, 20% of the world's fresh surface water is in the Great Lakes. So we are enormously fortunate to live near and have access to this precious resource, because unlike fossil fuels, there are no substitutes for fresh water. It's a renewable resource, but it's a finite resource. And what most creatures, including humans, need for life on Earth is water that's fresh and clean. And increasingly, we live in a planet where water is dirty and salty. And it takes a lot of energy to try to clean up water that's dirty and make it available for human and other use. This map shows the Chicago region, and that wavy line down the middle is what's called the Eastern Subcontinental Divide. Our water story here begins about 15,000 years ago, when where we are now was covered by the last glacier, which was about a half mile of ice sitting on top of our current metropolis. It was very heavy. And as that ice begins to recede, it slowly moves back and forth and scours the landscape, leaving glacial ridges and moraines, leaving a giant ice cubes that as they melt become prairie potholes, leaving a very great lake, and leaving this subcontinental divide as just the highest point on the landscape. But it's separated and still separates the Lake Michigan watershed from the Mississippi, so that all the rain that falls on the east side of this divide makes its way to rivers and streams and eventually replenishes the lake. All the rain falling on the west side of this divide makes its way into rivers and streams that eventually join the Mississippi and empty into the Gulf of Mexico. And you see these smudges on the lake. That's pollution, because as European settlers came to this area in the 1800s and began to settle the town of Chicago, they dumped all manner of human and animal and industrial waste into the Chicago River, a sleepy kind of slow prairie river that discharged into Lake Michigan, which then and now is a source of our drinking water. Not a good idea to put raw sewage into your drinking water. And indeed, people were getting sick from cholera and typhoid and other waterborne diseases. So by the 1880s, the city planners felt there was an imminent public health threat from contaminated water. There was no water treatment at that time to kill bacteria. It was just some pumped from the pumping station on Michigan Avenue through pipes to people's homes, but it wasn't filtered and treated. And so they knew they couldn't have a thriving city if people would come here and couldn't drink the water. So in 1889, the Illinois legislature established by a statute the Chicago Sanitary District, with a mission of protecting the drinking water supply in Lake Michigan by keeping sewage out of the lake. This image graphic shows the circulation of currents of water in Lake Michigan. And what you'll see is way down by the southern tip where Chicago is, there's very little circulation of lake currents. So what that means is whatever's dumped into the southern portion of Lake Michigan will stay there. Many years ago, the theory was the solution to pollution is dilution. If you just dumped it into a waterway, it would get diluted and thus not be as serious a pollutant. Well, that wasn't working very well. And there were storms that would sometimes push the discharged sewage from Lake Michigan back up the river. This is a primitive form of water supply, just filling a barrel with water from Lake Michigan, taking it to customers in Chicago. This image shows a very busy, industrialized Chicago River, full of ships and other kinds of vessels for conveying cargo, and pollution in the river that would flow out and contaminate the lakefront and the near waterways. So the sanitary district studied the problem and came up with a plan to dig a canal between the south branch of the Chicago River and the Des Plaines River, both to use water from the lake to flush raw sewage downstream away from the lake, and as a connection between Lake Michigan and the Mississippi for commercial barge traffic. Essentially, it was a 26-mile-long open sewer pipe, and it took 11 years to dig. This is a photo showing some of that excavation. Some of the techniques that were developed to dig the sanitary and ship canal were later used to dig the Panama Canal. And in January of 1900, the last barrier was lifted and the Chicago River was reversed. And for almost 20 years or more, Chicago sent raw sewage downstream away from the lake. St. Louis wasn't real happy about it and tried to stop it, but they weren't able to do so. And then more modern sewage treatment was brought over from techniques developed in Europe, so that the sanitary district in the late 1920s started building sewage treatment plants, including the one at Howard and McCormick that many of us drive by frequently. That's the Skokie, now called the O'Brien plant, one of the oldest. One on the far south side of Chicago called the Calumet plant at 130th and Torrance, and one considered the world's largest, our Stickney plant off of I-55 near Central Avenue. There are 3 smaller plants in the northern suburbs, and so gradually the service area of the sanitary district expanded to include not only Chicago, but a number of suburbs. Is now serves about 95% of Cook County for sewage treatment. So today, Chicago withdraws nearly 1 billion gallons a day of fresh water from Lake Michigan. It's filtered and treated at 2 filtration plants, along one right next to Navy Pier in the city of Chicago, one on the south side. Several of the northern suburbs have their own water filtration plants. Evanston, Wilmette, Glencoe, Highland Park, that take water out of the lake, treat it, and send it through pipes to our homes and businesses. And the Water Reclamation District, which changed its name in 1989 at its centennial to reflect its mission of trying to reclaim water. We say we take it after you flush. So after that water is used, it's sent to these sewage treatment plants where the solids are separated from the liquid waste. But that liquid waste is discharged into a system of Chicago area waterways. And this map shows the construction of those waterways. You still see that wavy line down the middle of the Eastern Subcontinental Divide, but now you see the Chicago, no more smudges in the lake, no more pollution. The Chicago River at the South Branch is connected by the sanitary and ship canal to the Des Plaines River. Subsequently, the Cal-Sag Channel was built to do the same thing for the south suburbs, to take water from Lake Michigan and flush sewage away from the lake. And the North Shore Channel, where the terminus is now Wilmette Harbor and it joins the north branch of the Chicago River, did the same thing for the northern suburbs. So it protected the water quality in Lake Michigan. I would submit it allowed Chicago to become a great metropolis, but it's been said that all problems started out as solutions. And it's worth remembering that, because the solution to the problem of Chicago's contaminated drinking water was to dig a canal and reverse a river. And these three man-made waterways are together known as the Chicago Area Waterways System. But in so doing, we did two things. We broke through that natural barrier, that subcontinental divide that separates the Lake Michigan watershed from the Mississippi. And we created this highway for environmental havoc between two watersheds that weren't really naturally connected, except for some times during the springtime when there was a portage between the two watersheds that could be made by trappers and so forth. And what this graphic shows is that breaking through the subcontinental divide by the sanitary and ship canal and so forth. This image shows this sort of kidney bean shape, shows what's called it's the part of the Lake Michigan watershed that is now no longer recharges the lake. It's the diverted part of the Lake Michigan watershed. The rain still falls on the landscape, still makes its way into rivers and streams, but because we reverse the Chicago River, it no longer replenishes Lake Michigan. It flows towards the Mississippi. So there's the water we withdraw from the lake and the rain that falls on this portion of the landscape that are called the Chicago diversion. And that's a sore point between other cities that border the Great Lakes. How come Chicago's able to take water out of the lake and not put it back? But a suit made its way all the way to the US Supreme Court that ruled that the diversion could stand, but it capped the amount of water that the Chicago region is permitted to withdraw at 3,200 cubic feet per second. That's indeed a lot of water, and we still have plenty of room to grow, to have industry and residential development, because there's an enormous amount we can do through conservation efforts, through water efficient appliances and so forth, and reusing our treated water for irrigation and some industrial uses. So we have a limit, but we still have plenty of room to grow within it. And what this shows in the white area is the remaining portion of the original Lake Michigan watershed. As you see, a very slender portion right along the lakefront, where the rain that falls on that part of the landscape will still replenish the lake, and probably a little bit to the west of that as well. So we've been experiencing dramatic fluctuations in lake levels. Some of you may recall that in 2013, the level in Lake Michigan was flirting with its all-time recorded low level. And in a mere 7 years later, the water in Lake Michigan was flirting with an all-time high level. The lake levels have fluctuated throughout recorded history and even before then, but what seems to be happening is that the intervals are shortening between those lows and highs. The lake level, fortunately, has dropped quite a bit since that high in 2019, 2020, but we're not sure yet what climate change will mean for this fluctuation in lake levels and the erosion that happens when storms batter the lakefront because of climate change. And this shows some of the averages and changes in lake levels over time. So the Water Reclamation District has a board of 9 elected commissioners. I'm one of them, who serve for staggered 6-year terms. We're elected at large throughout Cook County, which means it's a really tough race to run. It has just under 2,000 employees. We say we serve 5.25 million residents of Cook County, but the equivalent of 10 million people through treating industrial and commercial as well as residential wastewater. And we do that very efficiently. The district's budget is over $1 billion, most of that coming from property taxes, but also bonding for capital expenses. I'm happy to say the district is well run financially. We have a AAA bond rating and endeavor to be fiscally prudent with our money. In late 2004, the district was granted authority for stormwater management for Cook County by the Illinois General Assembly. And so now it has authority to manage and is responsible for 2 of the 3 legs of our freshwater ecosystem, namely used water and rainwater. We're not responsible for treating and delivering drinking water. But this is part of what's happened on our landscape. Over 30 trillion gallons of water have been diverted from Lake Michigan since 1967, meaning water that's been taken out, used, and sent down to the Gulf of Mexico. And it's estimated that 42% of Cook County is impervious surface. Buildings, roads, parking lots, sidewalks, all that paving and parking. And this is what's happening. We've given water nowhere to go. We've taken away the land's ability to absorb and infiltrate water when we have rainstorms. And the other thing that's happening, and I believe this is a symptom of climate change, is that storms are becoming more intense, more localized, less predictable, so that our sewer system could probably handle 3 inches of rain over 24 hours if it were a steady rain. But if it's concentrated in an hour, then that overwhelms the ability of our sewer systems to convey that water to larger interceptors, to the deep tunnel system, to reservoirs. And so we're seeing more flooding, more basement backups, and more of these intense rain events, which is what this graph shows. This was a storm that occurred in Burbank in August of 2014, but they're happening all over Cook County. You've heard about deep tunnel, and that's the TARP system is tunnel and reservoir plan. The tunnel itself is about 109 miles of large, sometimes as large as 33 feet in diameter, tunnel dug 300 feet under our waterways that was designed to capture stormwater overflows. And then that water is pumped to the treatment plants when they have the capacity to treat it. And the goal is to keep pollution out of our rivers and streams, because in Chicago, and I think in Lincolnwood and many of our older suburbs, we have what are called combined sewers, which means that pipe laid down the middle of the street that collects wastewater from our homes, from our toilets, our showers, our dishwashers and laundry machines, also collects rainwater that falls on our streets and that washes salt and oil and contaminants from the street into the sewers, where it mixes with wastewater and gets conveyed to a treatment plant. Well, as you might imagine, a pipe can only hold so much water. When it fills up, it's either backing up into our basements or was designed to overflow directly into a nearby river or stream. And that's called a combined sewer overflow. And that has some raw sewage mixed with a lot of rainwater and some other contaminants in it. So in the late 60s and early 70s, as more environmental awareness was growing and we tried to work to begin to clean up the pollution that we'd caused and thrown into our waterways, the sanitary district devised this tunnel and reservoir plan to dig tunnel to capture the combined sewer overflows and several huge reservoirs to do the same. And 2.5 of the 3 reservoirs are finished. The tunnel was completed in 2006 in 4 sections. And the tunnel can hold 2.5 billion gallons of stormwater overflow. When the final stage of the McCook Reservoir is completed in 2029, the whole system will be able to hold 17 billion gallons of stormwater overflow and dramatically reduce flooding and increase water quality in the Chicago waterways. But this is also what's happening. This is on my street in Skokie, where an older home in the top slide was torn down and a newer home built on that same lot, but it occupies a bigger built footprint. In other words, the size of the house takes up more of the lot. And as a result, there's more runoff from the roof and from the driveway. This overhead shot shows the larger footprint. So that's going to generate 50,000 more gallons a year of stormwater runoff that would flow into that same pipe running down the middle of the street that was laid in the 1950s. And again, if that rainfall happened in a orderly, slow manner year-round, the pipes could manage it. But when it happens in a handful of intense storms, you're adding more loading, and there are 4 such teardowns on my street alone. So maybe 200,000 more gallons in that same size pipe. And that's happening all over our suburbs. And so this is where I live, though the front yard now looks like a little oak savanna. But my partner and I live in a pretty modest single family home in Skokie with a rather large asphalt driveway. And there's a formula you can use called the runoff coefficient to determine how much rain is falling on your roof or your driveway and running off. And we calculated that our driveway alone, if we could capture the rain that's falling on it instead of running into the street, that would become 9,000 or 10,000 gallons a year that today flows into the street, collects salt and oil and contaminants, gets sent to a sewage treatment plant, and then goes to the Gulf of Mexico. How smart is that? So I wanted to try to see what 10,000 gallons a year looks like. And that's what it looks like over 3 years from one driveway. Later, we calculated what runs off of our roof, and we looked at our annual water bills, and we figured out if we could capture and store and treat and use what falls on our roof and driveway alone, it would come to 125% of our annual water use. In other words, nature's delivering free of charge pretty good quality fresh water right to our door in the form of rain, but we don't have a way to capture and store it and filter it. And this is a project in Northbrook, but they're happening all over, where in order to capture more rain and reduce flooding, a large underground storage system is being built under a public park. And then the play area and park area will be on top of it. And finally, just a shot of recreation on the Chicago River right downtown. Any of you could go and walk on the river walk or work overlooking, see lots of kayakers and other people recreationally using it. When it was first constructed, no one ever imagined that people would want to someday canoe or kayak or fish or even swim in the Chicago River. It was just teeming with waste. And in fact, for many years, there were no fish species in the Chicago River because the sewage sucked up all the oxygen, leaving none for aquatic life. But because of the sewage treatment plants and improvements and working with industry to reduce pollutants, we've dramatically increased water quality so that today there are between 60 and 70 species of fish that have been identified in the Chicago waterways. And someday some reaches may indeed be suitable for swimming. That's it with my slides. Here's just my contact info. Feel free to reach out at any time. But let me, let's go back. Here we go. I hope that worked out all right. One other point I'll make, and then happy to open it up for questions. Since I've been on the board for almost 15 years now, I've seen the dramatic transformation of this agency from what was just a sewage treatment agency to what I would now call a resource recovery agency. Because there's been a recognition that all those things we used to consider waste have value. And we're in the process of trying to capture and monetize that value for the benefit of the taxpayers of Cook County and for the benefit of the environment. So what do I mean by waste that has value? One thing is a lot of the water and sewage flowing into the treatment plants has nutrients in it. It's in the phosphorus, for instance, it's in the food we eat, and it's in the fertilizers that's on our lawns. And so when it comes into our treatment plants, we absolutely need phosphorus on land to grow our food, but in waterways, it grows plants like algae that suck up oxygen and that sometimes have toxic bacteria in them, so that it's a pollutant in waterways, and the algae leaves no oxygen for fish. But through a new process that we've installed at our largest treatment plant, and I'll hold this up for you to see, this is a vial of phosphorus crystals, because we're able now to capture phosphorus out of the waste stream and convert it into these crystals that can be sold and mixed and blended into fertilizer, but they're not water soluble. So we're taking something that's a pollutant in waterways and turning it into a vital resource that can be used on land. And we're getting paid $400 a ton for this. But whether we were able to turn it into a usable resource or not, we'd be required to remove the phosphorus by the EPA and because of our permits to try to reduce the nutrient loading in our waterways. But this is a fantastic method to turn a vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle. We're trying to reuse the water, that we can clean it up to a state that's good enough to be used for irrigation, as I mentioned, or for some industrial processes. There's enormous promise to use more of our wastewater for reuse instead of just sending it down to the Gulf. There's energy produced in the sewage treatment process, generates methane in the anaerobic digesters. We use about 80% of what's called biogas to heat the digesters at treatment plants and some of the facilities, but we're not able to capture and use all of it. And so we flare it off. That's an underutilized asset. We could generate even more biogas if we got more food waste, organic material into the digesters to generate more methane. You'll see more of that in the future. And finally, there are the biosolids, what used to be called sludge. The district is now manufacturing or producing a high quality compost by mixing high quality biosolids with wood chips from the city of Chicago and producing compost that has a lot of nutrients in it. There's a pile sitting outside of the Skokie plant on Howard. Take your buckets and fill them up. It's free for you to use. So I say that the sewage plants of the past will be the power centers of the future, generating renewable energy and recovering resources for the public. It's really an exciting time. Let me stop there. I'll take a sip of water and be happy to answer some questions.
I think first you can't hear a round of applause, but I saw people applauding after when you finished your presentation. Thank you so much. Wow, that was so informative. Yes, can you see us all? We are all clapping. Thank you so much for that. Let's invite everybody to put questions in the chat. There's one there already. I don't know if you can see it, Deborah. It says, would it be a good idea for villages to supply every home with a rain barrel that could be used could be collected as garbage to be processed?
Sure, it might be. The Water Reclamation District sells rain barrels at cost. It's a very low cost. They're delivered free of charge to your home. Any Cook County resident can purchase 2. And if you are over 65, I think they are at a even lower fee or even free. Alfred, you can correct me, but it's a great deal. So what you do, and I have them at our house, is attach it to your downspout and collect the rain that's falling off your roof. You can use that to water your garden or water your plants or lawn, and it will save you a little bit of money on irrigation, but it's a good use to allow that water to infiltrate and recharge our underground water supply. The issue with a village supplying rain barrels is you just got to make sure that they are properly attached and that homeowners know how to use them. They can fill very quickly. So some homeowners attach more than one. You can link them, or I connect it to a drip hose so that that hose will convey that water that's collected immediately out to my yard. But it's a great idea.
Great, thank you. There's another question. Do you want to read them, or do you want me to read them to you? Can you see them?
I can see them. So we posted some information. Thank you, Alfred, my staff aide, about our rain barrel program to find information about purchasing them. And as you can note, there's 75% discount for residents over the age of 65. They're much less expensive than if you were to purchase one at Home Depot or a garden center. There's a question, is the compost safe to use in vegetable gardens? I don't know, frankly. It has a lot of nutrients in it, but we are still researching the tiny in the parts per billion amounts of some chemicals that are found and that attach themselves to the solids. And certainly the compost is good for putting on your lawn, your flower gardens, tree nurseries, but you might want to do more research before using it to grow vegetables.
Thank you. Some more questions, folks? Feel free to put your questions in the chat. Okay.
So somebody's pitching the compost pile, which I've used myself, that it's on the exterior of the O'Brien treatment plant, and there's a little parking pad off of Howard, just west of McCormick, and bring your own shovel, but you can fill up containers as much as you want. It's a great product. So another question, with all the improvements, why do we still have beach clothing in Lake Michigan? Is it safe for swimming? The Chicago Park District, at least for the beaches within Chicago, and I guess the suburban park districts too, determine whether the beaches are safe for swimming, and they post warnings. Part of the reason that we still have beach closings is that there are a lot of Canada geese that deposit bird waste that gets churned up on the beaches by wave action that has bacteria in it. But also sometimes there are broken sewer pipes that are leaking into Lake Michigan, into the ravines that feed into the lake, or just sometimes into the lake. It's not because of reversals of stormwater to the lake very often at all. So another question, Skokie notes Skokie has free wood chips on Church Street, west of Skokie Boulevard and east of Austin. There's a pullout where you can collect those to use as mulch in your garden or lawn. Someone asked, could we get the formula for the runoff calculation to do our own calculations? I don't think we have it at our fingertips, Lori, but we'll please contact us. My email is shore, the letter D, at MWRD.org. We'll get you that formula. We'll get it to Ray and Karen and they can distribute it. It's fun to do. How can we support the goals of the MWRD? Well, I would say pay attention in elections and vote for candidates that are conservation minded, that are strong advocates for resource recovery. When I ran in 2006, I was the first person in 20 years to run with any kind of conservation credentials. Go figure, right? Some of you may remember a former member of the sanitary district board named Joanne Alter. She was a great conservation advocate, and I was very happy to have been endorsed by her when I first ran, and to carry on in her legacy. But now there are more members of the board who are strong environmental advocates. I'm happy to say I think we're seeing it change. It used to be a retirement berth or a stepping stone for politicians. But more and more, I think we're seeing people who are devoted to the mission of the district and who recognize that water is going to be the issue in years to come. In many places, it already is. And this agency has a key role to play in how we manage our precious freshwater resources. Another question from Alicia, are there driveway material alternatives we can use to avoid runoff? Absolutely. There's been a lot of new innovative development in what are called permeable surfaces. So there is a product called Filtercrete that's kind of like Rice Krispie candy, but it's a concrete so it can hold loads, but it has voids in it that allow water to infiltrate and then go into the ground and recharge our aquifers. There are pervious paving stones that allow water to infiltrate, and there's types of gravel as well. However, when my partner and I wanted to rip up our asphalt driveway and replace it with a permeable surface, the village of Skokie said you can only use asphalt, concrete, or paving brick, all of which are impervious surfaces. So we all need to work with each municipality to make sure that at a minimum they don't put obstacles in our way, and perhaps provide incentives for people to create permeable surfaces and capture that water and keep it out of our sewers. Question about the curbs at the intersection of East Prairie that have been replaced and are now raised. Is that to help with flood control? I'm not sure I know the answer, Darlene. It wasn't done by our agency. I'd have to try to find out. Someone's asking about water district goats and sheep. I've seen them as I pass the facility on Howard. They seem like a great alternative to lawn mowing or even maintaining a lawn in the first place. Where do they live? Do they have any kind of work to do in winter? And do you ever put them to work outside the water reclamation district? I think if you go to the Water Reclamation District's website, which is MWRD.org, there's a fun video about maintenance of some natural area plantings at district facilities by a herd of goats. We have engaged with a contractor who owns the goats, and they can nibble and eat away at invasive plants and native plants. And in places where we can't set fires to manage some prairie plantings, the goats can help manage them for us. I don't think we ever put them to work outside of the Water Reclamation District, but other land management agencies may do the same. Alfred has posted a link to the YouTube video showing the goats at work.
Any more questions? I know we got a lot to think about. And if you don't have a question, maybe just a reaction. What are you thinking about? Yeah, I see somebody wrote, thank you. What's coming up for you? What are you thinking about as we listen to Debra?
Oh, so what am I thinking about? Well, just to, there are a number of things that I've worked on over the years that I'm especially proud of. One of them is I pushed for many years and was finally successful to have an inspector general established at the Water Reclamation District. We didn't have one until several years ago. This is an agency that spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year on construction contracts, stormwater projects, and refurbishing our treatment plants and so on without independent oversight. And so I was proud to work with my colleagues and eventually get their agreement to establish an inspector general. I just think it's a good government practice. I worked with Larry Suffredin on the Cook County Board, which to adopt an ordinance to create a pharmaceutical take-back program so that there could be safe, secure collection sites for people to dispose of their unused or expired medicine, so they don't flush it down the toilet or pour it down the drain, as we used to be told to do. It turns out we can't remove all of the chemicals in pharmaceuticals at wastewater plants. So some of those chemicals end up in our waterways. And some studies are beginning to show detrimental effects on aquatic life. And we also know that if people don't know what to do with their unused medicine, it can accumulate at home in that drug dealer called a medicine cabinet. And so the path to some addiction often starts with the home medicine cabinet. So it's a good idea to have a place where people can dispose of their meds. And working with Commissioner Suffredin and the county board, they adopted an ordinance, and the sheriff has been expanding collection sites. I know you can drop off your unused or expired meds at the police station in Skokie, at the entry gate to our wastewater plant right off of Howard, and at many other locations. And I'd like to expand that even more. And most recently, I co-chaired an effort to develop a new 5-year strategic plan for the district. This was the first time the Board of Commissioners was involved along with staff in crafting this plan. And it's really much more focused on trying to address climate change, on trying to use equity as a filter that we look at all of our decisions and our activities, trying to direct more resources to disproportionately impacted areas of Cook County. And that's going to be a guide, I hope, that will help this agency be a leader in showing regional residents how we can be more resilient in the face of climate change. So those are a couple of things I've been working on, but more to come.
Fantastic. A couple more questions came in while you were talking.
Does MWRD give any in-service to Cook County municipalities to educate cities about things like filter creep? That's a good question from Susan Ginsburg. Susan, after the district received authority for stormwater management, it's been a number of years developing a watershed management ordinance that was adopted in 2014 that set minimum standards for development and redevelopment at sites throughout Cook County to try to avoid future flooding problems. And there is a technical guidance manual that the district produced to accompany that watershed management ordinance. It may be a little too technical, but the district staff does provide technical assistance to municipalities if they're grappling with flooding problems. We're paying for a number of stormwater master plans in areas around Cook County, and we'll eventually hope to get throughout the county for that. If you have more specific questions, I'd be happy to try to work with you on those kinds of things. And Edie asks, besides the rain barrels, are there things that homeowners can do that will have an impact? Great question. Sure there are. There are lots of techniques that are called green infrastructure, which are attempts to mimic the way nature would capture rain and allow it to infiltrate. So you've heard about green roofs, and you can see some on Chicago City Hall, or there's a wonderful green roof at the Chicago Botanic Garden, at their Science Center, basically taking that footprint that a building occupies and moving the land up to the roof. That slows the flow of rain into the sewers. It allows some to evaporate and grows plants which provide habitat for birds and insects and butterflies. There are vegetated ditches at the edges of parking lots or roads called bioswales, again, to capture rain off of a roadway and filter it and allow it to infiltrate. There are larger cisterns, bigger than rain barrels, that can capture rain. My spouse and I dug up our lawn and replaced it with ivy and vinca, so we no longer mow and just have a lawn that doesn't require irrigation, and planted a mini oak savanna in our yard, because trees are great not only for habitat and shade, but for capturing rain through the canopy and slowing that flow into the sewers, and great for carbon capture too. So there's lots of techniques if you Google green infrastructure to learn about. And Alfred has helpfully posted a resource for a district green neighbor guide. We have a really good public affairs department. They do have people who go out to classrooms, and we have material for children. There's a little booklet called, I have a carry bag called Where Does It Go? That tells the story of sewage treatment and poop. So a lot of resources for you if you want to learn more about sewage treatment and the district itself.
Great. More questions or comments, friends?
I just want to thank you for your support of me over the years as I have tried to represent our progressive North Shore community. Thank you for your interest in the work of the district. Previously, not very many people knew what it does. I think that's changing a little bit, but it still is a somewhat obscure agency with a vital mission. Someone asked, can you talk about lawns and how they are an impervious surface? Well, lawns do absorb some water, but there's a terrific graphic showing native plants, the plants that evolved in our ecosystem over thousands of years have root systems, some of which extend 10 or 15 feet underground. And those root systems are not only carbon capture systems, but they're water capture systems. And they're a conveyance for water to infiltrate and run deeper into our underground aquifers. There was a nature writer named Donald Colross Peaty who wrote a number of books around the early 1900s, and he called the Illinois prairie an empire of locked roots. And it wasn't until a blacksmith named John Deere and another named John Lane invented the steel moldboard plow that the settlers were able to break the prairie soil, and in the space of a generation, converted Illinois into agriculture, corn and soybean land, instead of the rich prairies. But the native plants have these root systems that are wonderful and rich. And it was thought that when they plowed up the prairies, there was a noticeable increase in atmospheric carbon because of the release from what was held in those soils. My point is that the Kentucky bluegrass that is on most of our lawns has a root system that's about 3 inches deep instead of many feet deep. So what you plant on your yard, there are other kinds of grasses that are more perennial, that do not require as much irrigation. If you don't want to rip up your entire lawn, maybe you can liberate part of it for a little native planting area. So Darlene's asking, is it clay that's under our topsoil? In many places, about 12 to 18 inches under the surface, there is a clay layer that kind of acts like an impervious layer. The prairie plants were able to kind of make their way through that clay layer, but the clay is a legacy of the glaciers because they compacted our soil. Imagine a half mile or more of ice was pretty darn heavy. Closer to the lake or the old lake bed, some of our soils are pretty sandy and pretty permeable, but there is a clay layer that it can be an issue in terms of how much water will infiltrate or not.
Ray, you have a question? You have your hand up. We were putting our questions in the chat.
I have a wise comment, which is that I wanted to mention that Debra is not only an outstanding member of the MWRD, Metropolitan D, but she stands up for other matters too. She was here for Lincolnwood's support of our Asian neighbors. She just appeared to support the campaign of I just lost her name, of the gal who's running for Cook County Board, Justina Merida. And so what's very special about this guest that we've had today is that it's not just her political office, but she engages herself in so many different ways in our community. And I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome, Ray. Thank you.
There's a lot of appreciation expressed in the chat also, Deborah. I hope that you're reading all the comments. There's getting a lot of kudos and appreciation in the chat.
Well, I appreciate the time you afforded me this evening. I hope you can tell that we have a wonderful story to tell, and I enjoy telling it. So thanks for listening.
It's been wonderful having you. Are there any other questions? Somebody wants to come see your lawn.
Sure. Feel free to do a drive-by. My address is 9232 Avers Avenue. It's between Church and Golf. closer to church. And there's a low stone wall sort of near the street and a lot of ivy and vinca and a couple of oaks and would love to have you stop by.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Getting a lot of applause and appreciation. We're all so grateful. This, you know, our purpose in Lincolnwood Together is to foster a community that's informed, engaged, and unified. And you have taken us miles down the road tonight as far as being informed. I think I speak for everybody. Very engaging presentation and so informative. I don't know, I think I learned a lot and now I'm interested in learning more. So thank you so much for being here.